Well, good morning. It's really nice to be here and to see quite a lot of old friends. I just do what Louise tells me, basically. She runs everything. All power resides there, just in case there is any confusion over that. Some people are a bit skeptical of talking shops, but I think the thing we found with SIX over the last few years is if you bring practical people together, entrepreneurial people, almost every conversation actually leads to practical things happening. And that's what's always been so exciting about the SIX events is, I think without exception, they've always sown a seed which has led to something very practical, very real, and often really changing the terms of how things happen. As Louise said, most of today is really about working, trying to, in a sense, design, shape what SIX Asia can be. But I've been told just to say a few words to sort of warm you up and offer a few thoughts, including on some of the things happening elsewhere. Just by way of background, where I now work is different from where I was last time I was in Hong Kong. I run a thing called NESTA, which was a public endowment set up by the government with lottery money. It's about £340 million. If the markets crash, it will be down again. Which combines investment, quite commercial investment in early stage companies, in technology companies, but also in social enterprises. We do quite a lot of research on how innovation happens in the economy, in science, and also in society. A range of programs with local government, health services, arts, and so on, and increasingly beginning to focus on how we can help provide skills for innovation with online tools, e-tutorials, and so on. But I'm not here really to talk about NESTA. I'm really here to talk about SIX and what lies behind what we're doing. And to me, the heart of why we're all here is very simple. We have worldwide incredibly dynamic fields of science and technology and of military technology. And indeed, in the United States and the UK, half of all public research and development money goes on the military. So it's not surprising we have very dynamic innovation in things like drones and missiles. The problem is we don't have really a comparable innovation in social issues on the questions of isolation in old age or drugs or childhood obesity or poverty. In a way, that's the choice we as a world have made, to invest very large sums of money in certain kinds of innovation, in technology, military, etc., and much less in these other things, which probably matter much more to many people. And for me, this question was summed up when I heard the story of a shaman in northern Canada, in the Inuit area of Canada, who meets a young boy. And the shaman says to the young boy, "I have inside me two bears. One bear is vicious, warlike, competitive, and the other bear is kind and compassionate and harmonious." And the little boy is a bit scared, and he asks the shaman, so which bear will win? And the shaman answers, "Whichever one I feed." And in a way, I think we are at a state in the world where we need to decide which bears do we feed. At the moment, we feed our warlike, militaristic innovation systems much more than we feed our systems of cooperation and collaboration and social innovation. And it's not surprising what results. In a way, that's, to me, the heart of the issue, but I also want to share a more economic perspective on things. These are two charts developed by some colleagues, the Young Foundation and the OECD, which I still find remarkable. If you look at health spending across the OECD countries and track it to mortality rates, those of you with a statistical mind will see the slightly strange pattern. The more you spend on healthcare, the more your people die, which is quite troubling. It suggests maybe something is wrong with our systems of healthcare. And then if you look at which countries increase their spending on healthcare and which improve mortality rates, again, the result is the opposite of what you would expect. Both of those exclude the United States, which would be off the chart in terms of spending and death rates. But what this tells us is the single biggest sector of the 21st century economy, 17% of GDP in the US already, is chronically dysfunctional. The more you put money in, the worse the results you get. Almost every aspect of our health system is not really designed very well to get good health outcomes. And that's why, and this is just one example, we need radical innovation if we're going to turn these around. That's why I think we've seen the emergence of the field of social innovation, very, very broad field, lots of different elements to it, just a few of which are shown in this scatter diagram, everything from some new ideas like Wikipedia, not such a new idea anymore, cooperatives, personal budgets, zero carbon housing, fair trade, you name it. This is a very, very diverse field of people trying to innovate better solutions to the things that matter in their lives. And over the last few years, quite a few people, including in this room, have been trying to make sense of this field. What do we know about it? How does it work? How do some ideas become really big and others not at all? What's the role of technology, the role of creativity, the role of business models? And these are just a few of the books. This one in the middle, the Open Book of Social Innovation, really came through SIX, through using the members of SIX to find methods in use all over the world and try and document methods being used, whether in East Africa or Brazil or China, to develop better solutions and spread them. And there have been many other people in this field, like Muhammad Yunus, Stephen Goldsmith, who was the mayor of Indianapolis and wrote a really good book about a year ago, the Stanford Social Innovation Review, and a stream now of academic books. There's 2 out this month, I think, from prestigious academic publishers on social innovation. Behind all of this, I think, is a change in the way we think about innovation. In the past, the dominant models, I think, were summed up by these 2 pictures. This was Bayer in Germany, pharmaceutical company, very science-based innovation in new drugs. And this is Bell Labs in America, which invented a whole host of things like the semiconductor. They were both very capital-intensive, very centralized, in big corporations, requiring lots of scientists, all put in a single building. And that kind of innovation is still growing across the world. In Asia, both China and India have very ambitious targets for growing this kind of R&D, 2.5% of GDP in both cases. And yet, if we look at what's happening, we see these other kinds of innovation spreading as well, much more user-driven innovation in all sorts of fields, like extreme sports or bicycling. Lots of innovation in services, like the cheap airlines in Europe. And lots of experiment with open innovation, where instead of having everyone in a single building like Bell Labs, you mobilize a network of partners. And of course, what we're talking about today, social innovation, exemplified perhaps by the moment when Muhammad Yunus got the Nobel Prize. And I think it's significant that an Asian was the first to get a Nobel Prize in social innovation. What's happened, I think, in the last 5 years is that this idea has started to become tangible in lots of ways which even a few years ago we couldn't quite imagine. And I'll just share a few of these. So we have social innovation parks. Bilbao in Spain probably has the most ambitious of these, which is a bit like the old science parks of the 1980s and 90s, but you create within a city a whole district devoted to social innovation, clusters, hubs, etc., for new ventures. Social innovation camps are now run all over the world, bringing people together maybe for a weekend to come up with creative new technological solutions to social problems. We have many social innovation centers. I was a few weeks ago in Toronto, in Canada, where they have these large buildings, a bit like the hubs, with hundreds of new organizations, and they're doubling in size every year or two at the moment. The pace of change is quite dramatic. We have social innovation funds, some coming from government. So Australia recently launched one, for example. In the US, the Obama government set up a $650 million innovation fund in education, very much based on the sort of principles we'll be talking about today. We have social innovation incubators across Europe. There are now about 30 or so in operation, maybe actually more than that, I think. Obama set up an Office of Social Innovation in the White House and is planning to grow it if he's re-elected. We have 100 or so social venture intermediaries in countries like the UK, social impact bonds providing new kind of finance, and I could go on. All of these didn't exist even 5 years ago. They are part of turning an idea into a practical reality in lots of ways. As Louise said, what we've been trying to do with SIX is link some of these things together. And I think it's interesting, SIX actually came out of an event not in London, but in Beijing, about 5 years ago, when there was a gathering of people in this field from around the world, all of whom said we needed some kind of network, not for big glitzy conferences, but to bring together the practitioners, the people on the leading edge of doing it, to really share from each other's experience. And SIX was formally launched in Sydney, Australia, by Julia Gillard, who is now Prime Minister of Australia. And there have been events all over Asia, and in Singapore and in India, where the National Innovation Council has really made social innovations core to the Indian approach of Jugaad, grassroots, community-based innovation. An enormous amount happening still in countries like Bangladesh with Grameen and BRAC and ASA and others. Louise will talk more about what SIX itself does, and I'll say a bit later on about what it's doing in Europe. But I think what we've tried to do is create a network of doers, which is very much focused on the practical tools needed to make things happen. Business was always meant to be part of this conversation. We never thought of social innovation as just about NGOs and charities. And these are just two examples, again, of Asia, in the form of Grameen, inspiring now European business to transform CSR. So what used to be corporate social responsibility now becoming corporate social innovation. In these projects from Danone in yogurts and BASF, the German chemical company, trying to shift from these often quite superficial CSR projects to much more fundamental design of new products and services to meet social needs. In the UK, probably the most important thing we're doing to the field is around new kinds of money, new finance sources for social innovation. Some of it comes from organizations like the one I run. Some is from new intermediary bodies investing in social entrepreneurs. We're experimenting with social impact bonds, which are now in the US called Pay for Success bonds, and Australia, New South Wales, calling them social, can't remember, Pay for Success bonds as well maybe. And lots of experimentation around crowdfunding. I just want to focus on one of these in the middle, which is probably the most ambitious of all, which is Big Society Capital, launched about 2 months ago in the UK with £600 million taken from unclaimed bank accounts, dormant bank accounts, with the backing of government to create an investment fund, a bank really, for social ventures and social innovation. And this is something I hope will be adapted or copied elsewhere around the world, because it is about to transform the capitalization of our sector from small bits of philanthropy, small public funds, to something on a much larger scale entirely. I think we're also seeing quite a healthy change in the relationship with government. This is one example which my organization runs, where government has given us £10 million, so maybe 120 million Hong Kong dollars, to run an innovation fund around giving. Giving of money, giving of time, and sharing of resources. And on our website, you can see all of the things we're funding, all of which are creative, innovations, many using technology, but to transform how we do altruism, giving, sharing, collaboration. And they're a very exciting set of projects. But 10 years ago, no government would have thought of funding innovation in giving. It just wasn't how a government would have thought of doing something, but nor would a government have realized that the only way to make it work was to fund an intermediary to do it, because these aren't the sort of tasks done well through government bureaucracies. I think if we look forward another 10 years, it's possible to see a very ambitious, very hopeful sort of picture of where we could be. I think all over the world we see civil society becoming much more important, a much bigger field of mutuals and social enterprises, a new generation of technologies which make it possible to design, to collaborate, to cooperate in new ways, much more data flowing about what actually works, and I think a changed relationship with government and business, a relationship of much more respect than in the past. I think we've begun to internalize into them the very simple message which Linus Pauling said, and he's the only person to have ever won 2 Nobel Prizes, that the only way to get good ideas is to have lots of ideas and throw the bad ones away. This is a very unnatural process for big bureaucracies, whether in government or business, but it's the only way creativity happens. A lot of what we were talking about here yesterday was how do you do this better? How do you generate more ideas? This is just a little example from vacuum cleaning. James Dyson, who is one of the UK's more successful entrepreneurs, was very like Thomas Edison, who invented the electric light. Edison had 10,000 attempts before he got the right filament for electric lights. Dyson had 5,000 prototypes before he got to the one which worked. But again, this is very rare for public organizations or charities to think like this, to think about the need for creativity. I think I'm going to jump through this just because of time, maybe a little bit, or maybe just mention a couple of things which are going on in the social innovation field internationally. So I think what we're now trying to do a lot more is think about systems, not just how we get good projects or good social ventures, but how to transform whole systems. The Hiriko City car was chosen by the European Commission a couple of months ago as the symbol of social innovation because it's an electric, rentable, foldable car which requires almost everything else in the city to change around it, how you plan your roads, your charging systems, as well as the manufacture. This is another example I like, which is a really powerful example of social innovation, which is couch surfing. One of the many innovations in collaborative consumption. Couch surfing has more beds than all the international hotel chains put together. But it's grown up organically from the grassroots up, mobilizing people's unused beds as a way of creating a new tourism industry. We've got the same in cars, things like Buzzcar, providing a platform for people to rent each other's cars rather than Avis and Hertz. These are true systemic changes. And a little example from the UK is on libraries, where we encourage people in a part of London to put their own book collections onto the public library system so that others can borrow books from their neighbours and not just from what sits within the library. A way of thinking about resources and underused resources in a very different way. I'll jump over these other ones, as much as I love them. This time is short. And maybe just end with a little bit about, well, 2 things. Whoops, I've lost my place now. So I just want to say a little bit about what I hope SIX Asia can do. It's okay. And what's happening in Europe, which is perhaps a parallel. And kick off with one word about what Mr. Park was saying last night, and which he may talk about this evening. I think all of this, in a way, or a lot of it, is about happiness. How do we actually promote well-being and happiness, and not just economic growth, and not just military power? And this is just one organization which I was involved in launching last year, which I think is really interesting both for its goals, but also as an innovation. This is a platform helping people to be happy in their own lives, but also in their school or their neighborhood or their business. It has about 20,000 now, actually, members, about 500,000 users. It has one member of staff. And it is using collaborative technology in a very powerful way to promote a very new set of ideas. And in a way, that's the model for what I hope maybe we can get out of SIX Asia and out of today. About 2 years after SIX got going globally, Europe, to our surprise, got interested in it, partly led by Diogo Vasconcelos, who was the chairman of SIX, and did this remarkable report for the European Union where he got big business to argue that the whole thrust of innovation policy needed to move away from big technologies towards social challenges, social goals, and social innovation. That persuaded the European Commission to fund SIX to run Social Innovation Europe, which is now creating a space for thousands of social entrepreneurs and public servants and business people to work together on problem solving, on new ideas. There will be prizes linked to this, new R&D funds, new business startup funds, and so on. A really surprising pace of change across Europe, helped by SIX as an enabler, linking together the many countries of Europe. And in all of this, what we're trying to do is perhaps summed up by this painting, if you can see it. Do any of you recognize this painting? It's a painting by a man called Turner. And what it shows, it's a bit dark, is this is a steam tug pulling an old ship to be broken up. And this is about, in a way, the difficulty of the innovation process. Why, although it's easy to talk about it, it's often quite difficult to do. Because this is quite a beautiful old ship, which people were very attached to. But it was only by removing it, by creating the space for these other ones to come in, that innovation was possible. And one of the things I hope we can talk about a little bit today is also the topic of a report from NESTA a few months ago called The Art of Exit. How do we get the old things out of the way to make room for the new? Because if you don't do that, innovation never gets anywhere. It always remains marginal, small scale, a nice idea, but not impactful. And this is, I think, where we're trying to head all over the world, is not just the creativity, the generation of ideas, but also how do we get a bit tougher in getting the incumbents out of the way, the failing old models, which sit usually on power and money and prestige, but don't usually work anymore at all. And the fundamental question, I guess, for me, which relates to that, is this one about the bears. Which bear will we feed? Will we feed the competitive, militaristic, aggressive bear, soaking up billions and billions of dollars in R&D, or are we actually going to choose to feed the other bear? And that's true for us as individuals, it's true for our organizations, and it's also a choice, I think, for all of our societies and what we try and persuade our societies to do as well. Thank you.